This isn't just a story about one person's fight to save their home. It's a deep dive into what some call the foreclosure machine, a system that some would argue is built to favor huge financial institutions over regular people. We're going to look at how one single ruling in one courtroom on one day can change literally everything. Okay, let's get into it.
So picture this, it's October 22nd, 2024, inside an Idaho courtroom. We're at something called a summary judgment hearing. This is basically where one side says, hey, judge, there are no real facts to argue about here, just rule in our favor now and let's skip the trial. But in this case, the entire fate of a family's home is hanging in the balance of this one decision.
And boom, with just those few words, the judge slams the door shut. The homeowner, Jeremy Bass, is representing himself. He doesn't have a lawyer. He had just filed some really crucial evidence to fight back against new arguments the lender's attorneys made at the last minute. But because of a procedural rule, the court says, nope, we're not even going to look at it. And that moment right there is the whole ballgame. It brings us to the central question of this entire explainer. How can a single procedural rule, one that basically stops you from getting the last word in, end up having such absolutely devastating consequences? To really get what's going on in that courtroom, we have to pull the camera back. Way back. We need to look at the massive system that was really born out of the chaos of the 2008 financial crisis. This is a system that, for all intents and purposes, completely rewrote the playbook for homeownership and foreclosure in America. So after the '08 crash, the mortgage industry became, well, kind of like the Wild West. Banks were dumping huge portfolios of loans, and the paperwork was an absolute train wreck. This mess led to the now infamous robo-signing scandal, which blew the lid off a system where speed was everything and accuracy was, well, an afterthought. And right in the middle of it all was this database called MERS, which made it almost impossible for a homeowner to figure out who actually owned their loan. And let's talk about robo-signing for a second. That term became the perfect symbol for this whole new industry. We're talking about employees, sometimes sarcastically called Burger King kids because they had no real experience, signing hundreds of legal documents a day, swearing that they had personal knowledge of facts they've never even seen. It was basically a foreclosure factory. And then you have MERS. The easiest way to think about MERS is like a private club just for the banks. See, before MERS, your mortgage was a public record down at the county courthouse. MERS took that system and made it private. Critics ended up calling it a massive concealment scheme because it essentially hid the ball, taking away the one sure way a homeowner had to identify the true owner of their debt. Right, so here's a crucial point. The players in this world aren't strangers to each other. In our story, the loan servicer Carrington, the bank, and the law firm IDEA are all super connected. They're all part of the same industry groups, like the American Legal and Financial Network. We're talking their executives and lawyers are literally serving on the same committees, helping to shape the very rules of the game they all play. And this quote from an expert just nails the core problem. The paperwork trail got so hopelessly tangled that, in a lot of cases, nobody could actually prove who owned what. So, instead of cleaning up the mess, the industry allegedly found a workaround. Just create a new paper trail. Recreate the chain of title you need to get the foreclosure done. And why would they do that? Well, this quote from an industry insider says it all. When there's very little risk of any real consequences of anyone going to jail, fabricating documents isn't just a solution. As he puts it, it's a profitable business venture. And that incentive structure is still very much in play today. Okay, so that's the 30,000-foot view of the system. Let's zoom all the way back in now, back to that courthouse in Idaho, and see how this machine actually played out for our homeowner, Jeremy Bass. So, from the lender's perspective, the case was simple. Bass stopped paying his mortgage, case closed. But the story Bass tells is way, way more complicated. He says he was actually trying to pay off the entire loan. And not only that, the servicer was doing things like making him responsible for property taxes and insurance that just don't make sense if you're about to foreclose. So this wasn't just a simple default. It was a major factual dispute. And the dispute gets even wilder. Bass made some absolutely stunning allegations against the servicer, Carrington. He claimed they offered him $100 to sign backdated loan papers, that they created a whole second deed out of thin air that doubled his debt, that they completely botched his COVID forbearance, tacking on fees that shouldn't have, and maybe the biggest one of all, that his signature was straight up forged on a key document.
But even with all of these serious, unresolved questions, the foreclosure auction happened anyway. And the final sale price for the property came to $165,346.71. But how did they land on that very specific number? Well, Bass argued the auction was totally rigged. And his proof? The winning bidder showed up with cashier's checks already made out for the final bid amount, down to the exact penny. Think about that. He argued there's just no way you could guess that in a real competitive auction. It pretty much screams that the buyer and the trustee knew the final price before the sale even started. So now he's facing eviction, and Bass starts putting together his appeal. And as he's going through this mountain of legal arguments, he has this breakthrough moment, an insight that completely reframes his entire case. He realizes the fight isn't just about a rigged auction or forged papers. It's about his fundamental constitutional rights. You know, this breakthrough really came out of pure frustration. As someone representing himself, they call it pro se, Bass was stuck in this classic trap. You're always playing catch-up. By the time you do the research and finally figure out the complex legal rules, the deadline to actually use that knowledge is gone. You're always fighting yesterday's battle with today's information. It's an impossible situation. And here's how he connected all the dots. It was like a chain reaction. It all started with that one moment in court, the ignored objection. Step 1. That single decision. Step 2, allow the lender's claim that he just stopped paying to go into the record as an undisputed fact. Then, step 3, the judge uses that fact to grant the summary judgment. And finally, step 4, that judgment becomes the legal justification to foreclose and take his home. It's a straight line, one thing leading directly to the next. And this is his aha moment. He realized he wasn't fighting 4 or 5 different things: the shady paperwork, the weird auction, the court rules. No, it was all one thing. It was a single, unified story about how violating his constitutional right to be heard is what opened the door for the whole system to roll right over him. And this strategic shift it's brilliant. The case isn't just some messy fight over a house anymore. That one ignored objection becomes the central pillar of his entire appeal. It's the lens that pulls everything else, the alleged forgeries, the auction, into sharp focus. They're not separate problems. They're symptoms of a bigger disease, a fundamental violation of his right to due process. So, you might be thinking, why should I care about this one case in Idaho? Because the principles that are on trial here, the right to actually be heard in court, the balance of power between a person and a massive corporation, these things affect every single one of us whether we own a home or not. This quote from Boss just perfectly captures what's at stake. His appeal isn't just some legal exercise, it's a real-world stress test of the Constitution. Is due process just some fancy phrase in a textbook? Or is it a real shield that actually protects regular people when they go up against powerful, well-funded opponents? He's literally about to find out. And his case forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. In Idaho, and in a lot of states, if you represent yourself, you're held to the exact same strict, complicated standards as a lawyer with 30 years of experience. But is that really fair? Especially when you consider that Bass contacted over 125 law firms, and every single one of them turned him down. He was forced to go it alone. So in the end, this whole story leaves us with this one big thought to chew on. Our legal system is built on rules. It has to be, for order and efficiency. But when those rules actually prevent someone from telling their side of the story, when they silence a defense before it's even spoken, you have to ask yourself, what's the real cost of that efficiency? And what is the price of just being heard?